If you're new to vector drawing, then drawing in Moho might seem a little weird. But if you've used vector tools in other drawing programs, well, drawing in Moho might still seem a little weird. Luckily, Moho's vector drawing tools are pretty easy to learn, and I'm going to show you how. Hey, welcome back to Little Green Dog's animation tutorial series. In this episode, we'll learn what vector drawing is and how it differs from bitmap drawing. Then, we'll take a look at Moho's vector drawing tools. And then, we'll finish this lesson with a drawing exercise using Moho's Add Points tool. The version of Moho we'll be using is 14.2. When we draw in Moho, we're creating what's called vector art, which is literally artwork drawn using points connected by lines. So it's kind of like drawing a connect the dots puzzle. Moho's vector art has two parts: curves and shapes. First, we create a curve using points and lines. Then, we select that curve and create a shape. If this sounds confusing, think of it this way. A curve is the skeleton or framework of our drawing, and a shape is the skin we wrap around that skeleton. What's unique about this method of drawing is that we can move the points to change the shape of the artwork, and we can do this without degrading the line quality and details. By comparison, when we reshape a bitmap image from a traditional paint program the same way, so is vector art better than bitmap art? No, it's just different. However, the elastic nature of vector art makes it especially suitable for animation. Let's review some of Moho's vector drawing tools. There's a lot to cover, so I've chapter marked each tool in this video to make them easy to find later. Before we begin, we need to set up a few things. First, create a new project file. By default, the Layers window will contain a single vector layer, which is where we'll create the artwork. Over in the Style window, set swatches to Gradient and uncheck Checker Selection. Click and drag the eyedropper next to the fill color and select an orange color from the swatches display. Click and drag the eyedropper next to the stroke color and choose a violet color. Set the stroke width to 10. You can type in the number or click and drag in the box to dial it in. Cool! Now we're ready to look at the vector drawing tools, which are located in the upper part of the Tools window. Notice how many of these tools appear grayed out? This is because Moho's Tools window is context sensitive, which means it shows only the tools that can be used with the current selection. To see all of the vector tools, there needs to be vector art in the layer, so the tools have something to work with. Okay then, let's create some vector art. In the Tools window, click on the Shapes tool. It's the one with the tiny shapes. The Shapes tool is used to create common shapes like rectangles, circles, and triangles. In the tool options, make sure the Autofill and Autostroke options are checked. Now I'm going to select the Star option and click and drag from the center of the working area. Congratulations! We just created our first vector art. What we are looking at is vector art made from a single curve, which is displayed as these points and thin edge lines. The curve has a single shape attached to it, with an orange fill color and a violet stroke color. Remember, in Moho, a shape is like a vector art skin, to which we apply color and textures. In this case, the shape and its colors were automatically created because we checked Autofill and Autostroke. The colors and the line thickness came from our settings here in the Style window. If your colors look different from mine, it's because our style settings are different. But that's not important right now. What is important is that all of the drawing tools in the Tool window are active and ready to use. Yay! As you can see, Moho has lots of tools related to vector drawing, but we're only going to need 7 of these tools for this drawing lesson. At the top of the Tools window is the Draw group, which contains tools to create and edit curves. The 4 draw tools we'll be using are Select Points, Transform Points, Add Points, and Curvature. Below the Draw group is the Fill group, which contains the tools to create and edit shapes. The 3 fill tools we'll be using are Select Shape, Create Shape, and Hide Edge. The other Draw and Fill tools are important too, but they're specialized, so we'll talk about them as we need them. Okay, let's check out the 7 tools. To make it easier to see what I'm doing next, let's uncheck the stroke and fill display options so only the curves are visible. Throughout this tutorial, we're disabling certain options to help us stay focused. If you wish, you can turn these options back on afterward. In the Tools window, choose the Select Points tool, and in the Tool options, make sure Lasso mode is unchecked. As the name suggests, the Select Points tool lets us select points in our curves. When I click and drag with this tool over a curve, it selects the points that fall within the rectangular selector. Clicking in an empty space drops the selection. When I hold down the Control key, the tool switches to a lasso selector. Holding down Shift while selecting will add points to the selection, and holding down Alt or Option on a Mac will remove points from the selection. Points can also be selected by clicking directly on them individually. The Shift and Alt modifier keys work for individual selection too. By the way, if you have trouble remembering the modifier keys for any tool, you can find them described at the bottom of the window. Or, if you open Preferences and check Status Bar at the top of Window, the information will appear in the tool options. Personally, I find it more convenient to see the tool information up here in the tool options. Okay, where were we? Oh yeah! To select all the points in a curve, select at least one point and press the Tab key. Finally, to delete selected points, just press the Delete key. Dink! Now let's select the Transform Points tool, and in the Tool options, uncheck Show Bezier Handles. We'll talk about what this option does later. When points are selected, we can use the Transform Points tool to move the points. This tool can also rotate and scale them. One neat feature of the Transform Points tool is that you don't need to click directly on a point to affect it. The tool works on the point that is closest to the cursor. For this next demonstration, let's select the Add Points tool and make sure Show Bezier Handles and Sharp Corners are unchecked. The Add Points tool lets us create curves point by point. This is the tool we'll be using most of the time when creating artwork that will be rigged and animated in Moho. Using Add Points in Moho 14.2 is simple. Just click and click and click. Moho will automatically connect the points with each click and draw a curve. When we click on the first point, Moho will close the curve. If we want to leave the curve open, we can double-click on the last point to end the line. Optionally, we can press the Enter key or the Escape key, and the tool will drop the last point. In older versions of Moho, you need to click and drag with the Add Points tool to draw a curve. If you just click, Moho will draw disconnected points. Click and drag works in Moho 14.2 as well, and it is still necessary for certain drawing techniques. To extend an existing curve, click on an endpoint and continue drawing. To add more detail to a curve, clicking on the edge will insert points. To branch off from a point in the middle of a curve, just click and drag from that point. With my current Add Points tool settings, Moho draws a smooth line segment passing through each point. But if I check the Sharp Corners option, it draws a straight line between each point, resulting in corner points. When I want to switch between smooth and sharp corner points while drawing, I hold the Control key to toggle between the two modes. Let's take a look at the tool options for Add Points. The first option is Auto Weld. When this is checked, Add Points can automatically merge the new point with another point or edge. When the option is unchecked, you need to press the Enter key to weld the point. I normally have Auto Weld checked, but I'll switch it off when I'm working in an area with a lot of points close to each other, so I don't accidentally weld them. I'll talk about autofill and autostroke when we get to the fill group part of this segment. We've already seen what sharp corners does. I tend to leave this option unchecked, but it depends on what I'm drawing. I'll explain what I mean during the drawing exercise later in this tutorial. The next option is Show Bezier Handles. When this is checked, Moho displays these extended handles on the points, which can give us more control over the curvature of the points. Bezier points is a powerful drawing feature in Moho, and I'll talk about this during the exercise too. Speaking of curvature, the next tool is the Curvature Tool. This tool lets us control the roundness of our points. For now, let's uncheck Show Bezier Handles so we can focus on the basics of this tool. Doink! To use the tool, position the cursor over a point and click and drag horizontally. Dragging to the left sharpens the point, and dragging to the right will make it smoother. We can also dial in the smoothness by clicking and dragging inside the curvature box in the tool options. To make a sharp corner, we can click on the Peak button here. To make it smooth again, we can click on the Smooth button. When we have multiple points selected, the Curvature tool affects the entire selection. For this next demonstration, turn on the display options for fill and stroke so we can see the shapes. Choose the Select Points tool and click on the star shape. Notice how clicking on the shape will select the points and curves of that shape. Press the Delete key to delete it. Select the Draw Shape tool, then the Circle option, and draw a bunch of circles. Okay, we're ready to look at the tools in the Fill group. The first tool is Select Shape. This is completely different from the Select Points tool because it specifically selects the shape in the vector art. When a shape is selected, we can edit its colors or textures. Or change its position in the shape border. More about shape border in just a minute. To select a shape, choose the Select Shape tool and click on the shape. To select more than one shape, hold the Shift key and click on another shape. Or hold the Shift key and drag the cursor over the other shapes to select them. If you want to select all the shapes in a layer, you might assume Ctrl-A would do that. But that shortcut selects all the curves in the layer. To select all the shapes, click the Select All button in the tool options. When shapes are selected, we can toggle their fill and stroke properties from the tool options. We can also change the colors and edit the stroke width from here. These settings are linked to the settings in the Style window. The next options are for Liquid Shapes, which is an amazing new feature for Moho 14. I love this feature. I use it all the time, and I would really love to talk about it. But Liquid Shapes deserves its own tutorial video, so we're going to skip over it for now. But don't worry, I'm working on it. Finally, there's the Merge button. When multiple shapes are selected, the Merge button flattens the shapes into a single shape. But why would I want to do that? You know, I'm glad I asked that question, and I'm going to answer it in a few minutes. So moving on to the Create Shape tool, this one is easy. Just select a curve, set the shape options, and press the Enter key. Presto! We made a shape. Clicking the Create Shape button in the tool options is the same as pressing the Enter key. As mentioned earlier, new shapes get their settings from the Style window. When the style of the shape you created isn't what you wanted, use the Select Shape tool and the Style window to change the settings. The Connect and Create button allows us to create a filled shape from an open curve. It works by closing the curve so it can create a shape and apply a fill. Pretty nifty, huh? The Hide Edge tool is used to hide an edge between connected points. For example, this can be useful for creating open edges in body parts, so they look like they're attached to the body. Moho has other useful drawing tools like Magnet, Delete Edge, Eraser, Freehand, and Blob Brush. We'll cover these and other drawing tools in another tutorial. Let's practice what we learned with some drawing exercises. In the first exercise, we'll learn how to use the Add Points tool. As mentioned earlier, this is the tool we'll use most of the time when creating artwork for puppets. Then, in the second exercise, we'll learn how curves and shapes work, and pick up some useful vector drawing techniques. If you want to follow along, you can download the Moho project by clicking the link in the description below. By the way, if you're using an older version of Moho, I've included a Moho 12.5 version of the file. After you download and unzip the file, open the project file for your version of Moho. Before we dive in, let's take a minute to go over Moho's navigation controls. Over in the Tools window, Moho has navigation tools for panning, zooming, and rotating the workspace. But if you have a mouse with left and right buttons, you won't need these tools. To pan the workspace using a mouse, press and hold the right button and move the mouse. To zoom, you can use the mouse wheel to move in and out, but see how chunky this looks? To move smoothly and more precisely, try this instead. Press and hold the Shift key while holding the right mouse button. Now that's smooth. To rotate the workspace, press and hold the Control key while holding the right mouse button. I find this useful when I'm drawing in Moho using the Freehand tool. To reset the workspace view, press the Home key on your keyboard. Doink! One more thing. Because we won't be animating in this exercise, we don't need to see the timeline. So let's hide it by pressing Ctrl left bracket. This gives us more space to draw in. When I need the timeline back, I can press Ctrl left bracket again. Right now, I want it hidden, so I'll press the shortcut to hide it. Cool! Let's look at the project file. In the Layers window, there are two layers. The top layer is an image layer that we will be tracing from, and beneath that is a vector layer called Draw Here. Select the Draw Here layer. Before I draw, I'll set my colors in the Style window. First, I'll pick my fill color. Let's go with a nice pale blue color. For the stroke color, I'll sample the same color and darken it. There we go. Let's check the colors by drawing a shape. I'll select the shape with the Select Shape tool and make the stroke a little darker. Yeah, that looks good. I don't need the circle anymore, so let's delete it. Bink. Now let's select the Add Points tool. In this exercise, we're going to trace the castle line pattern using two different techniques. Go to the Add Points tool options and uncheck Auto Weld and Auto Fill. We want Auto Stroke and Sharp Corners checked on, and Show Bezier Handles should be off. The first and most obvious way to draw this pattern is to click on each corner in the line. So click, and click, and click, and click. And when we get to the end, double-click to end the line. And there you go. Because we had auto stroke enabled, the tool automatically created the stroke shape for us. Let's delete this and try another way. This time, instead of clicking, I'm going to click and drag with the Add Points tool while holding down the Shift key. The Shift key constrains the tool to draw horizontally and vertically. So just click and drag, click and drag. If you're using Moho 13.5 or earlier, this is the way you'll have to do it, because the click-only method I showed you is available only in Moho 14. I'm going to press the G key for select points, and T for transform points to move this up a little. I'll press the Escape key to drop these points. Notice that Moho didn't automatically create a shape for this curve. That's one of the drawbacks with the click and drag method. It won't do that. In this case, we need to select the curve with the Create Shape tool and press Enter to create the stroke shape. Also, when we're using the click-only method to draw open shapes, it's important to have autofill unchecked. If we have autofill checked on, Add Points won't auto-stroke the line. But when autofill is off and we draw a curve, then Add Points will create the shape for us. I don't know why it's like that, but it's something to be aware of. Okay, let's delete this and move on to our next example, which is this wavy line. In the previous example, we drew a line using sharp corner points, and here we will draw this line using smooth points. Let's select the Add Points tool, and in the Tool options, uncheck Sharp Corners. And what I'm going to do is click at the point where the curve changes direction, like so. And when we get to the end of the curve, I'm going to double-click. And then I'm going to click and drag to add a point here so I can curve the end. And I'll do the same for the other end. Now, if we zoom in, you can see how the arc doesn't quite match our tracing image exactly. We can get closer by selecting these points, pressing C for curvature, and then adjusting the roundness of these points. That's closer. Our next example gets a little tricky, because this line combines both sharp and smooth points. So, to do this, I'm going to turn on sharp corners because there are more sharp points in this pattern. And to switch to a smooth point, I'm going to press and hold the Control key when I click. Remember, you can check here if you forget which modifier key to use. I'm going to start by clicking on the first 2 points of the line. Then, I'll hold down the Control key and click in the middle of this dip to create a smooth point, release, and click on the next sharp point, Control key for a smooth point, click, click, Control key click, click, and double click. And then, select the points in the humps, and use curvature to increase their roundness to match the tracing image. And there we go. Pretty easy, huh? Before we got Bezier points in Moho, this was how we drew everything in Moho. And in my experience, it's important to know how to draw with regular Moho points before relying on Bezier points. Drawing with regular points sometimes requires adding a few more points than we might need with Bezier points. But when you're bending the artwork using bones or another method, curves drawn with regular Moho points can deform more predictably than Bezier points. But that said, Bezier points are pretty awesome, and I'm going to show you how to use Bezier points in this extreme example down here. This line pattern, with the curled waves, is an ideal candidate for Bezier points. To demonstrate, I'm going to first draw this using regular Moho points, and then I'm going to draw it again using Bezier points. We have sharp corners enabled. Let's uncheck this because this line is mostly smooth. I'm going to place my point mainly where the curve changes direction. Don't worry if this part seems mysterious. With a little practice, you'll begin to see where to drop your points. I've had a lot of practice, but sometimes I'm just guessing too. Let's end the line here. I'm switching to transform points to make some tweaks here and there. You can see how I'm able to get pretty close to the tracing image. Let's use curvature to round this out a little more. And there we go. And then I'll select this curve and copy and paste it, and move it using transform points. Copy and paste, transform points. Now make sure Auto Weld is on for our transform points tool. Move the endpoint over the other endpoint. If we zoom in, we can see the endpoints are highlighted to let us know they're about to be welded. Let's go over here and repeat this. Press Escape to drop the welded point. Grab this point and drop it on top of the other point. There. Let's make a few adjustments. Oh, there's a point here. So that's how we draw this line without Bezier points. But since we have Bezier points, if I don't intend to animate this with bones or the magnet tool, I'll draw this using Bezier points. To do that, we select Add Points, check on Show Bezier Handles, and kind of work the way we did before. Control key for sharp corner, and double-click here. But now we have these handles we can adjust. Oh, let's turn this on here. And you can see how this lets me get a very accurate shape with fewer points and less work. And the rest is kind of the same as before. Let's copy and paste this. Copy, paste. I'm trying to grab this point, but I keep grabbing the handle. So let's hide the handles. That's good. Bezier points can take less work. Just be careful when you use them for animation. So between these 4 techniques, we can draw almost anything in Moho. Okay, drawing open shapes are fine for lines, but for filled areas, we need to draw closed shapes. We'll learn how to do this in our next exercise, drawing closed curves and shapes. Let's turn off Bezier handles to make it easier to see what I'm doing. In the first example, we have a house. Let's try drawing it with the Add Points tool. Make sure Autofill and Autostroke are checked on, Sharp Corners is on, and now I'll just click around the edge to make the house shape. And then click around here to make the window shape. So this looks good, but with something like this, an easier way is to use the Draw Shapes tool. Check on Autofill and Autostroke, and click and drag to create a box for the main part of the house. Then we'll draw a window. Press A for the Add Points tool, add a point in the middle of this edge, and there we go. Now that was much easier, wasn't it? So, I just wanted to show you that there were many ways to do the same thing in Moho, and sometimes it can be easier to combine multiple tools. After a while, you'll develop a feel for which tools and techniques are better in a given situation. Oh, I'm sure you've noticed by now that I've been selecting my tools by pressing letters on my keyboard. So this is probably a good time to talk about tool shortcuts. The tool shortcuts I'm using can be found in the tooltips for each tool. And you really only need to memorize these 4 up here. Add Points is A, Transform Points is T, and Curvature is C. So, pretty easy to learn. For some reason, Select Points is G. Maybe that's for Get Points, Gather Points. I don't know. I think they just ran out of letters. But you only need to remember G, T, A, and C. Oh, here's a good way to remember. Just go backward. C, A, T is cat, and G is for gato. Cool, huh? Okay, I'm going to select the window shape and change its color to yellow to make it pretty. And also to make it clear that we're looking at two separate shapes. As mentioned earlier, when we have multiple shapes in the same layer, each shape needs to be behind or in front of another shape. In this case, because the window shape was created after the house shape, it's in front of the house. But if I wanted the window shape to be behind the house shape, I would select the window with the Select Shape tool and press the down arrow to send it back. Press the up arrow to bring it forward one level, and down to send it back one level. If we had a lot of shapes stacked on top of each other, I would use Shift up to send the shape to the front of the stack, and Shift down to send it completely to the back. Let's bring it to the front. Now, earlier I said that shapes have to be in front of or behind other shapes, but that's not completely true. It's possible to create multiple shapes at the same level, but when you do this, something very interesting happens. The effect is probably not what you would expect, but it's a valid technique in Moho, and I'm going to show you what happens in our next example. So let's make another house, and this time I'm going to select the Draw Shape tool and uncheck Autofill and uncheck Auto Stroke. And I'll recreate the house by drawing this box, and then a smaller box. Then I'll switch to the Add Points tool and make the peak for the roof. Now this time, I'm going to use Create Shape to select both curves, the one for the window and the one for the house. And you'll notice that the window is cutting a hole through the house shape. Let's go ahead and create this shape. And let's make it the same color as the first house. This is what happens when two shapes are combined at the same level and they overlap each other. Moho doesn't really allow this, so the shapes wind up erasing the region where they overlap. Now let's move the window shape outside of the house shape. Now we can see two filled shapes, but as soon as they cross over, the shapes start canceling each other out. In another program, this might be called a live Boolean effect, and it's an easy way to create holes in a shape. A popular use of this technique is to create two circular shapes to cut eye holes in a face shape, so you can animate a pair of eyes behind the holes. Let's go ahead and do that. Select the Delete Shape tool and delete the two shapes. This may look like the tool also deleted the curves, but it only deletes the shapes. If you select any Draw tool, you'll see the curves are still there. I'm pressing G to select the window curve, and T so I can move it here. Let's make it a little smaller. Let's copy and paste the window curve, and move the copy over here. Now, I'll select the Create Shape tool, select all three curves, so we have a house that has two holes cut in it, and press Enter to create the combined shape, like so. Let's create a circle. Let's turn Autofill and Auto Stroke back on, like so. And let's fill it with a darker blue color. I'm going to move the circle over here, copy and paste it, move the copy over here. Select both shapes, and use Shift down to send them behind the combined house shape. And now, we can animate two eyeballs behind the window holes. There are many ways to create holes in Moho, and this is one of the easier methods. Alright, let's move on to our next example, which is this loop thingy. This one is tricky because it's a single closed curve that's overlapping itself. So what do you think will happen when we create this shape? Let's find out. Select Add Points, turn off Sharp Corner because there are no sharp corners in this drawing, and let's also uncheck Autofill and Auto Stroke for more dramatic effect. So let's draw the loop by dropping smooth points along the edge. A corner here, smooth point, corner point, smooth points along the edge here, here, and here, and here, another corner point, smooth point, and close the curve with another corner point. Press C for curvature so we can round this out more. Press T for transform so we can move points. C so we can get these ends nice and rounded. There you go. Let's select the Create Shape tool and see what we've got. So this is what happens. The shape erases itself in the area where it overlaps. Let's go ahead and create the shape. And yep, you can see this effect in the actual shape. So what can we do about this? Sorry, let me change the color so we can see the outlines. So let's fix it. Select and copy the curve, paste it, move the copy over here. We're going to fix the copy so we can compare it to the original. Select Delete Shape and delete this shape. Now remember, when we delete a shape, the curves used to make the shape are still there. So when we pick a Draw tool, like Add Points, we'll see our curves and points. Now let's make sure Autofill and Autostroke are unchecked, and Show Bezier Handles is turned off. Now I'm drawing a short line segment between the two top points in the loop. I'll press T for transform points and move the point in the short line over the loop point. Make sure Auto Weld is checked on. Now, when we move the points close to each other, you'll see a highlight that tells us it's going to automatically weld these points. And down here, it's going to automatically weld these 2 points. What we have now is one curve that's been split into 2 enclosed curves. This means we can create 2 separate filled shapes from this structure. So when we use Create Shapes to select the points in this closed curve, we can create a shape for the right half of the loop. And when we select the points on this closed curve, we can create a shape for the left half of the loop. Let's do that. For Stroke and Fill options, make sure the Both option is selected. Now press Enter, and we have our shape for the left side of the loop. Now select the points on this side and press Enter. Let's hide the tracing image by clicking on the eyeball. So now we have a loop that correctly overlaps itself. But we've got a stroked line here. To fix that, we can use our friend the Hide Edge tool. Just wipe over the edge to hide that line. Understand that this tool doesn't delete the stroke, it just hides it. You can always unhide it by wiping over it, and hide it by wiping it again. By the way, if you'd like to see what this looks like without the curve lines visible, you can switch this off by clicking the Show Curves button down here. This shows you a good approximation of what the final render will look like. Let's turn it back on. Anyway, that's how you make a shape that overlaps itself. Let's turn our tracing image layer back on. Now let's meet our final challenge. In this example, we have a torso with 2 arms. One arm is clearly in front of the torso. But over here, we have an arm that goes from behind the torso and wraps around to the front. Well, how are we going to do that? Let's first draw the torso. Turn Auto Stroke and Autofill back on. Sharp Corners is unchecked, so I need to hold down the Control key to draw this sharp corner and this sharp corner. Release the Control key to draw the smooth point here, here, and here. Now I'm going to hold down the Control key and close this curve. This gives us a nice torso to work with. Let's round these points a little bit and move them a little higher. There we go. Now let's draw the arm. Boop. A point at the elbow. A point at the wrist. I basically place a point wherever I see a peak or direction change in the shape. I also think about how the shape needs to bend or deform in animation, and how the geometry I'm drawing will support that. A point at the wrist, the inside of the elbow, and I'm going to hold down the Control key to make a sharp point. And let's close it. There we go. Okay, let's make a few adjustments. I'm using curvature to round this out a little more. Using transform to tweak the shape of the hand. I'll use hide edge to hide the shoulder line. Okay, that looks pretty good. But now we face the tricky bit. How do we get the arm to go from front to back? We are going to apply the techniques we just learned, splitting shapes in a curve and arranging the stacking order for shapes. We don't need to draw another arm because we have a perfectly good one right here. Let's select it, copy and paste it, move the copy over here, and let's flip it by clicking the Flip Horizontal button up here. I'm going to move the arm over here, and then we're going to use transform points to rotate the hand. Move a few points to match the tracing image. Let's bring the inside elbow point here. The elbow here. Use curvature to round this a little more. Okay. All right, I think that's close enough. So, remember how shapes are either in front of or behind other shapes? This means we can select this arm shape and move it behind the torso. But that puts the hand behind the torso. And when we send it to the front, now the shoulder is in front of the torso. So we're going to split the arm shape at the elbow. Let's do it. First, delete the shape. Now select Add Points and draw a little dividing line between the two elbow points. And with Auto Weld enabled, we'll weld these points. Oh, because we have Autofill and Autostroke on, Moho drew the shapes for us. Let's go ahead and weld these points to split the curve. Now, because we split the curve after Moho created the shape isn't split. When we select it, you can see it's still just one shape. What we need to do is delete this shape, then select the points in the upper arm, and create a new shape for the upper arm. Then we'll select the points for the lower part of the arm, and create a shape for the lower arm. Then we'll use Hide Edge to hide this elbow segment. So when we use Select Shape to select the upper arm, we can use the arrow keys to send it behind the torso. And the hand now stays in front. We can reverse this too. We can select the lower arm and send it behind the torso, and send the upper part in front. Let's hide the tracing image so we can see this more clearly. Let's send this to the back. Pretty cool, huh? Well, that covers the basics of drawing with Moho's vector drawing tools. What we just learned should allow you to draw anything you can imagine. But as I mentioned earlier, there are more drawing tools to learn about in another episode, and I'll be sharing more advanced drawing techniques too. But this should be enough to get you started. So, go! Practice drawing. Play around with these tools. Experiment, make stuff, and have fun. Before we wrap this tutorial, here's some advice. Don't feel you need to keep changing the tool options as I was doing during the demonstrations. That was mainly done to help illustrate what I was doing more clearly. When I'm drawing in Moho, I typically set my tool options and then leave them alone. In fact, I often leave Autofill and Autostroke unchecked and draw most of my curves in one pass without shapes. And then I'll create all my shapes in a second pass. Working in stages like this is usually faster for me. Oh, and don't forget to press Ctrl left bracket to bring back the timeline window. This concludes part 1 of our Let's Draw Vector Art in Moho mini-series. In part 2, we'll learn more about vector drawing in Moho, and then we'll draw the thumbs up cat. We'll also learn how to break out character parts for puppet rigging. Until then,